Let me officially and warmly welcome Taoiseach Micheál Martin to Strasbourg. We are very, very glad to have you here with us today for the next chapter of our This is Europe debates. I very much look forward to our plenary debate that is due to start, as you can hear by the bell, in a few minutes. This is an important year for Europe and Ireland for many reasons. This year marks 50 years since the Irish referendum to join the then named European Economic Community, now the European Union. And moreover, it brings me great joy to see the continued Irish high approval for their involvement in our united European project. In this difficult year, Ireland and the European Union have always shown collectively our dedication to our common values, sending humanitarian and political support to Ukraine and welcoming those fleeing. And for this, I thank you, and I now give you the floor.
Can I take the opportunity in the beginning to express my appreciation to you, President Metsola, for inviting me to address the plenary session of the European Parliament this morning, and to say, Roberto, that your timing is impeccable. As you have said, Ireland celebrates 50 years of joining and acceding to the then European Economic Community, and to say that that was the most transformative decision taken by the Irish people in our 100 years of independence. And it has transformed Ireland, both economically, socially, and also, I think, fulfilled the aspirations of the founding fathers of our country in terms of being internationalist in our outlook and embracing the fundamental concepts of democracy, human rights, and freedom of expression. And yesterday, I think we both had the opportunity to unveil a bust to John Hume, a person who in many ways encapsulated that European ideal and whose experience here at the European Parliament was extremely effective and transformative in terms of the approach he brought to politics and to bringing peace to the island of Ireland. And it's those values that have us now in solidarity with the people of Ukraine in terms of the values that they are defending against an imperialist regime that is wreaking havoc and destruction on the people of Ukraine itself. And it's to Europe that the people of Ukraine are looking in terms of inspiration and wanting to be involved again in sharing those fundamental values with us. And finally, also, of course, we are particularly grateful to the solidarity of the European Parliament, to the European institutions more generally, in respect of the impact of Brexit, particularly in the context of Northern Ireland, and the steadfast support we have received in terms of working out the implications of Brexit and the protocol and so forth, in terms of the unique circumstances that apply to Northern Ireland. And the European Union, and particularly the Parliament, has shown great understanding and great solidarity as we work to resolve outstanding issues.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, please, on the microphone there.
Taoiseach, sorry, Paul Hosmer from the Irish Examiner. Taoiseach, the Taoiseach last week indicated that he might look to a referendum on European defence in Ireland. If that referendum was held today, how do you think you would vote? And President Metsola, do you think that European defence is something that all nation states of the EU should look to be involved in?
Well, first of all, as I've said, and I've consistently said, we need to reflect on military non-alignment in Ireland and our military neutrality. We are not politically neutral. And I think it's important to take everything in the round and to assess that in the context of a Citizens' Assembly, which would bring an informed, evidence-based approach to deciding upon that issue. We don't need a referendum to join NATO. That's a policy decision of government. We would need a referendum to join a European Union defence pact if one was formally developed and declared, because there are provisions in our constitution that would demand such a referendum. For the moment, I'm focused on maintaining the unity of purpose that is very evident in Ireland in relation to our overall approach to Ukraine. And our position has not in any way hindered or stymied the broader European Union response, and particularly the deployment of the peace facility. We are part of European security and defence process and negotiations or discussions for quite some time, for many, many years now. And we work with our colleagues to develop stronger interoperability between our defence forces, particularly on joint peacekeeping missions and peace enforcement missions. And that's the journey I see ahead of us. But I do think we need a reflection on it, but it needs to be informed and without division. And let's have a professional, evidence-based, informed approach to that issue.
I'll pick on one of the last words that the Taoiseach said, which is reflection. And if that we can calculate, or we can see what was one of Putin's biggest mistakes, is that he thought that his invasion of Ukraine would actually push for later stage or not take the decision by certain countries to come closer militarily. The exact opposite has happened. We saw the decisions taken by Finland and Sweden, countries traditionally neutral. The concept of neutrality is different in different countries, and that is also a discussion that is taking place within this Parliament. When we are looking at the treaties that underpin everything we do, this Parliament has called for a real security and defence policy of the European Union, understanding that different member states have different realities, different histories and different processes and procedures they would need to go through. But at the end of the day, politically, to quote an old saying, you can't be neutral between the fire and the fire brigade. And that is something that is happening in all national parliaments when discussing how we are addressing an invasion by an autocratic regime unilaterally in the most brutal manners that has threatened the very territorial sovereignty of a country on our continent.
Anyone else for a last question?
Yes, thanks so much. Naomi O'Leary, Irish Times. Taoiseach, I'd love to pick
Good morning, dear colleagues. This morning we have the pleasure of welcoming Taoiseach Micheál Martin, the Irish Prime Minister. Taoiseach, thank you for coming to address the European Parliament as part of our This is Europe debates. This year is an important one for Ireland in Europe and an important one for Europe with Ireland. It marks 50 years since the Irish people voted overwhelmingly in favour of joining what was then called the European Economic Community, and 50 years on, we are pleased that Irish citizens' support for the European project remains extremely high. The Irish Prime Minister being here with us in plenary is also an expression of Ireland's commitment as Europe faces difficult times with an illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Over the years, the European single market has helped Ireland's economy become highly competitive. But Ireland continues to give a lot back to Europe too, economically, politically and socially. Economically, Ireland's success story has allowed it to move from net recipient to net contributor to the EU budget. And politically, Ireland plays a central role in shaping common policies, particularly on finance, on the environment and on providing vital aid to Ukraine. And here I must commend Ireland for being the first country in the European Union to waive visa requirements for Ukrainians and for welcoming nearly 30,000 displaced Ukrainians who have sought shelter. We are all painfully aware that Ireland is particularly affected by Brexit, and good relations with the United Kingdom remain in all our interests, especially in this new geopolitical context. On Northern Ireland, all the European Union institutions are aligned. Renegotiating the protocol on Northern Ireland is not an option. The European Parliament has reiterated its unwavering support for the protocol on several occasions, and we remain fully committed to preserving the peace on the island of Ireland. Last night, this Parliament officially took receipt of a gift from the Irish government of a bust of former member of the European Parliament and Nobel Peace Prize laureate John Hume. His legacy is an inspiration with regards to conflict resolution and with regards to respecting differences. His work in brokering peace on the island of Ireland and in hammering out the Good Friday Agreement is highly respected and honoured in this House. This Parliament is attached to multilingualism, and with the Irish language now a fully fledged official EU language, let me say in Irish, Go raibh maith agat. Thank you.
President Metsola, Vice Presidents, distinguished leaders of the political groups, members of Parliament, citizens of Europe, it's an honour to be here today, and I thank you, President Metsola, for your kind invitation to address this session. I would like to salute your leadership of the European Parliament. Before I reflect on Ireland's European path, it would be remiss of me not to pause to pay tribute to that great European, David Sassoli, who graced the office of President of this Parliament with such intelligence and dignity. Through his life and in his work, he demonstrated integrity, compassion and a strong focus on the most vulnerable in society. He will be long remembered, especially here in this Parliament, and he is sorely missed. Éire go raibh
May he rest in peace.
In any measure, this is a critical moment in the history of Europe and the Union which we all share. We face a series of fundamental challenges. Will the values of free democracies prevail in the face of military and other aggression? Will we act together to protect hard-won progress in our societies? Do we have the ambition and urgency required to achieve energy security and tackle an existential climate crisis? Do we have the strength to overcome the many forces which seek to return us to the days of destructive rivalry and competition between the nations of Europe? My message to you today is that we stand resolutely with all those who share the core values of peace, democracy and progress in Europe. And we believe that protecting these values demands a strong European Union. Is léargas báilríocht na Parlamente seo ag súlacht na...
Membership of this Parliament is testimony to the diversity of Europe, of our languages, our cultures and our histories. No two nations are the same. However, we come together and in a spirit of mutual respect, we plan our way ahead, we debate it and we lay it out. I would like to warmly welcome the end of the derogation with regard to the status of Irish in the European Union. Since the beginning of this year, Irish is today on an equal footing with the languages of the other founders of the European Union. It is an important step ahead and it will strengthen the language community of Irish.
Being transformative. We have seen an overwhelmingly positive impact across all dimensions of our society. Last month, we marked the 50th anniversary of the decision of the Irish people to join what we now call the European Union. And for us, there is simply no doubt this membership has been an historic enabler of sustained progress for Ireland. The decision of the people of Ireland to support membership was overwhelming, but it was not achieved easily. In the then 6 existing member states, questions were asked if Ireland, then the poorest country in Europe, was simply too peripheral and too poor to be able to survive in the European community. At home, a coalition of forces used the classic anti-Europe tactics of claiming that we would be swamped by a neo-imperialist organisation and would lose our separate identity. However, an overwhelming majority rejected these arguments. The Irish people instead chose the path of hope and solidarity, of cooperation and a shared future. Time and time again, this decision has been vindicated. One of the inspiring things about that decision 50 years ago is the role which was played by leaders from our revolutionary generation, those who as young people had done so much to win our independence against tremendous odds. They did not see Europe as a threat to our sovereignty, but as an enabler of our sovereignty. They rejected the idea of nationalism as a narrow and defensive concept. Instead, they believed nationalism should be outward and forward-looking. And just as they did, we continue to be inspired by the ideas contained in our Proclamation of Independence from 1916, when the greatest of our leaders committed their country to the ideals of equality, diversity and cooperation with other nations. And that is why the democratic majority of the Irish people remain Euro-positive and why we see the success of the European Union as directly linked to the success of nation-states. Over the last 50 years, sharing our sovereignty with our European partners helped to make us all safer, stronger and more prosperous. And Ireland has in turn been proud to contribute strongly to the shaping of today's European Union. In the intense debates and negotiations of the past 2 years, I and my government have been very clear. The Union must be strengthened. In order to serve us all better and to respond to urgent challenges, it needs more ambition and resources. We have been and we remain supportive of a growing and diverse union based on shared values and shared prosperity. This has been a consistent theme during our presidencies of the Council. During our 1990 presidency, we strongly supported European Union recognition of German reunification. During our 2004 presidency, we worked to ease the arrival of 10 new member states to our Union and hosted a day of welcomes to underpin this. Through enlargement, we have welcomed new communities, and they have since made a wonderful contribution to the Irish economy and society. And enlargement has been essential to strengthening our Union as a whole. As we are seeing every day during the response to Russia's war against Ukraine, member states that secured their freedom from Soviet imperialism and totalitarianism are a powerful voice, reminding us that free democracy must be defended. I am strongly of the view that the prospect of membership can be a powerful driver of reform, and that membership itself is the most powerful tool we possess to enlarge the sphere of democracy, peace and security in our region. Our treaties are clear that any European state which respects the values of the Union and is committed to promoting them may apply to become a member of the Union. It should be a source of pride and inspiration that the Union continues to be a beacon of hope to people at our borders, to the people of the Western Balkans, to the people of Ukraine, currently sacrificing and enduring so much in defence of our shared European values, to the people of Moldova and of Georgia. We should support those looking to join in undertaking the reforms and preparations necessary, and when they meet the criteria, we should not place further barriers in their way. I strongly support Ukraine's application for membership, and I look forward to the Commission's opinion. I hope that, when the European Council meets in June, it will be possible to send the people of Ukraine a clear and positive message. Ireland's lived experience, and we are not alone in this, is that European Union membership is transformative. It is not only about access to markets and to economic opportunity, though that is of course important. It is about what it means to people. People who send their representatives to this Parliament. People, young people especially, who benefit from the freedom to move throughout the Union, to learn, to work, to experience life in another place and with another culture. People who gain confidence and strength from knowing that they live in a union of values, of laws, of democracy, in which human rights and human dignity are fundamental guarantees. That is our strength, and Ireland is proud to be part of such a union. And no matter what its opponents say, let us never forget that the European Union is the most successful initiative for peace in our continent's history. In Ireland, we feel this so deeply because of the Union's role in supporting our successful efforts to bring an end to campaigns of violence which lasted for 3 decades. When I arrived in Strasbourg yesterday, I was privileged to join President Metsola in a ceremony to honour the only person to serve as an MEP who was also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. John Hume was a political giant. A proud Irish nationalist and democrat, he dedicated his life to the cause of serving his people and persuading the minority to abandon violence and join in democratic politics. John was passionate about his country's future, and that is why he was also a passionate supporter of the European Union. And John had the vision to see the narrative of Ireland's path to peace in the wider narrative of peace in Europe, a peace built on respect for political and cultural diversity, cemented with economic interdependence. He overcame opposition from both extremes to chart a peaceful way forward for Ireland. His integrity and bravery shone through. With another courageous politician, David Trimble, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for an unwavering commitment to peace. He won every election he stood in and served in this Parliament for 25 years. And it is one of the many harsh realities of the Brexit vote of 2016 that no serious consideration was given to the implications for Northern Ireland and the agreement which underpins peace and reconciliation. The Good Friday Agreement provides a clear framework for protecting different identities and interests in Northern Ireland. It is a triumph for democratic politics, and it has been a model for conflict resolution in many parts of the world. I can think of no more solemn agreement than one which has ended a deadly conflict, has been democratically ratified, and has been in operation for a quarter of a century. Because of this, a very detailed deal was negotiated and adopted to limit the damage on Northern Ireland caused by Brexit. Central to achieving this generous deal was the unwavering support and solidarity of our partners in the European Union, including the members of this Parliament. I want to pay tribute to the European Parliament, which was absolutely clear in its support for the Good Friday Agreement and on the need to find a unique solution that would work for Northern Ireland. That solidarity mattered. That solidarity continues to matter. The unique solution was, of course, the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland that is an integral part of the withdrawal agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom. It is perfectly reasonable to look for ways to improve the operation of the protocol, but unfortunately what we have seen are bad faith efforts to undermine a treaty freely entered into. Instead of trying to create a constructive atmosphere for all to engage, we have actually seen efforts to block agreements or introduce new problems. In contrast, the European Union has worked hard to find ways to ensure that where there is a negative impact on businesses and citizens in Northern Ireland, it is minimised as much as possible. Vice President of the Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, and his team have done remarkable work in listening to businesses and communities throughout Northern Ireland. They have a deep and practical understanding of the operation of the protocol. Last October, the Commission proposed a package of measures that would result in a significant reduction in border-linked checks. This Parliament has also been incredibly constructive. For example, in April, you overwhelmingly approved legislation to help safeguard the supply of medicines to Northern Ireland. I have said many times that there are solutions to practical problems under the protocol if there is a political will to find them. But that requires partnership. It requires the United Kingdom government to engage with good faith, seriousness and commitment. Unilateral action to set aside a solemn agreement would be deeply damaging. It would mark a historic low point, signalling a disregard for essential principles of laws which are the foundation of international relations. And it would quite literally be to the benefit of absolutely no one. Without a spirit of partnership, there would have been no peace process in Northern Ireland. Without trust, without engagement, without a willingness to see things from the point of view of others, there would have been no Good Friday Agreement, no quarter century of peace in Northern Ireland in which young people have been able to grow and to flourish as themselves. All of us in positions of leadership owe it to them not to treat lightly what was so hard won. As we look across our continent, as we see what is at stake when the rule of international law is threatened, it falls to all of us to work together and to stand by what we have agreed. I am humbled and inspired by the extraordinary courage and resolve of the people of Ukraine as they defend their country and their right to determine their own future. The conflict is, at its most fundamental, about two utterly incompatible views of the world, autocratic and democratic. The new imperialism of Putin's regime must not stand. Ukraine's cause must be the cause of every person who believes in free democracy. As the European Council said once again last week, Russia must end its slaughter and withdraw from the entire territory of Ukraine. I know that the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, is here in Strasbourg today, and to him I say, Ireland unequivocally supports your country, your people, and your right to a peaceful, democratic and prosperous future. We strongly support the toughest possible sanctions, and we do so understanding that this involves costs for us all. We are honoured that more than 34,000 Ukrainians have sought shelter in our country. How many times have we heard ideologues from the extremes condemn and attack the European Union? Yet today, for many millions of people on our borders, it is the flag of blue with a circle of golden stars which symbolises their wish to be free. In 2014, the people of Ukraine took to the streets to demand a democratic and European future, and for this they suffered invasion and partition. We did too little to stand with the people of Ukraine then. We did too little to reject Putin's new imperialism and his demand to control other countries in a sphere of influence. And this happened while he was constantly investing in extremist parties and disinformation in our countries, putting us all on notice that the destruction of the European Union was a core policy objective for him. We must stand with Ukraine, not just during this war, but in the months and years ahead. Our agenda must be Ukraine's reconstruction, its securing of democracy and its inclusion within our Union. We must also support the democratic right of the Belarusian people to new, free and fair elections. We must condemn the detention of political prisoners such as Sergei Tikhanovsky, the husband of the inspiring leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. As a country with our own experience of famine, we condemn the illegal appropriation of agricultural production in Ukraine, which is having a direct impact on global food security and affordability and is affecting the most vulnerable communities in parts of Africa and in the Middle East. It is hard to comprehend that hunger itself has been weaponised. Ireland will support the European Union in playing its part in an effective and swift international coordination to ensure a comprehensive global food security response. And just as we are now showing urgency concerning Russian aggression, we also need to show more urgency on the other major challenges facing our Union and our citizens. We must redouble efforts to accelerate the decarbonisation of our society, break our dependence on fossil fuels, and provide a more resilient, secure and sustainable energy system for future generations. There are many who continue to ignore or casually dismiss the scientific consensus about climate change. However, nobody can surely ignore the direct political and economic threat which dependence on fossil fuels poses. As far as Ireland is concerned, we unequivocally accept that climate change is a critical threat and it must be a defining issue for us. An immediate and large-scale reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is crucial. Unless we act now, terrible outcomes will be inevitable. We believe that Europe must push forward with its initiatives, including the European Green Deal and the Sustainable Finance Agenda. Ireland is ready to play our part. We have enacted legislation to put a legally binding target of reducing emissions by 2030 to 51% below 2018 levels. In taking the necessary steps, we must bring our citizens with us and ensure a just transition for all. Let us make sure that the regions which are most affected get a genuine opportunity to transition to a longer-term, more secure and more prosperous role in energy production. I remain confident that we can rise to this challenge. In this, I am inspired by how we came together in the face of the largest pandemic the world has experienced in a century. Despite the unprecedented nature of COVID-19, and after some initially hesitant steps, the European Union quickly came together in an unprecedented way in support of its citizens, businesses and member countries, making it a role model for the world. We played a pivotal role in supporting vaccine development and procurement, becoming the leader internationally in the production and distribution of vaccines. Through Next Generation European Union, the Member States and institutions came together in solidarity to address the economic impacts of the pandemic across our Union, supporting not just our collective recovery, but the green and digital transitions we need to bring resilience to our economies and our societies. There are hundreds of thousands of people alive today because of how we worked together to understand, control and target this terrible virus. However, there is no question that we were not fully prepared for the pandemic and we had to innovate new policies rapidly. Our shared public health tracking and advice structures were not strong enough because we had not viewed this as a priority area. And this is one of the many areas we should address as we look to reforming and strengthening the Union. The European Union is by no means perfect. It is a project that must continue to develop and evolve, and differences will arise between Member States and between the institutions. However, it is our capacity to work together through these issues that makes the European Union something to be immensely proud of. Over the past 2 years, I have signalled at the Council that Ireland supports more ambition and urgency in developing the Union. We have rejected the idea that every debate must be a zero-sum fight between countries. And that is why, even though we are a net contributor, we supported a larger budget for the Union. The highly limited level of the budget means that the Union is often over-focused on a limited range of current or desired powers at the expense of a more active agenda of enabling activity. We believe that we need more investment in skills and research, the foundations for sustained prosperity for all our people. We have supported greater ambition on key reforms to fully address the policy gaps which caused so much damage during the financial crisis. We believe that the Conference on the Future of Europe has begun an important dialogue on our shared future. The recommendations of the conference include some very worthwhile suggestions that can be implemented quite quickly, as well as some that are more ambitious and wide-ranging. Let's focus on building a union which can directly enable action in critical areas, and by respecting important principles such as subsidiarity, we can have a more constructive debate. Our guiding principle should be, how can we best prepare our union to continue to meet the needs of its citizens into the future? Ireland is ready for this debate. We will work to constructively shape our new future and are open to treaty change if this proves necessary. We should first, however, do what we can within the existing framework. We have in recent months and years started to face up to the reality of challenges to the core founding principles of our Union. And this is not just an economic bloc. The treaties which we have all signed up open up great opportunities for us all, but they also carry fundamental responsibilities. The Union cannot work if its members refuse to follow the laws which apply to us all. And the Union cannot have a purpose if we do not absolutely insist on protecting democratic and human rights in all of our countries. As John Hume said, the basis of peace and stability in any society has to be the fullest respect for the human rights of all its people. For some time, we've been going through what has been called a democratic recession in the world. There has been an attempt to push back against the idea that democracy and human rights are fundamental to sustained human progress. Every day we are seeing the terrible human price paid when a country's leadership stops debate, closes down political competition, controls the economy and ends the rule of law. So as we learn the lessons of this moment, let's understand that if we want the values of a free, democratic and prosperous Europe to survive and succeed, we have to speak up for these values, and we have to do so even when it's uncomfortable. Jean Monnet famously said that Europe will be forged in crises and will be the sum of the solutions adopted for those crises. He has repeatedly been proven right. However, he missed an important extra element. Yes, we have constantly required a crisis in order to make major changes, but ultimately we are more and more seeing that if we want progress for Europe, it must be forged by its commitment to values. We must protect and strengthen these values. If we do this, we will remain a beacon of hope to others, especially our fellow Europeans in Ukraine. In our Union, we are better together. In our Union, we are better together, we are stronger together, we achieve most and best when we work together. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Taoiseach, for that inspiring speech. I now give the floor to the representatives of the political group, starting with the EPP group, Francis Fitzgerald.
President Metsola, Commissioners, colleagues, Taoiseach, thank you so much for so passionately and comprehensively outlining the importance of the EU to Ireland, past, present and future. As we both know, membership of the European Union has been nothing short of life-changing for the people of Ireland over the last 50 years. That historic vote in May 1972 to join the European communities changed the economic and social trajectory of the Irish state for the better. And as an Irish woman, I can unequivocally vouch for this positive change. The 5 decades have witnessed Ireland's emergence as a modern, open economy and society, shaped by close reciprocal cooperation with our European partners. We strongly endorse the European values of human rights, democracy, freedom of the press and rule of law. The European Union is a beacon, a model and an instrument for obtaining peace. Fittingly, last night, as the Taoiseach said, we paid tribute to a committed European, a peacemaker and a former member of this Parliament, John Hume. We remember his outstanding work for peace and his resolute determined stance against the use of violence in Ireland. He believed in and personified this institution, describing the EU as the most successful peace project in history. He believed in extensive dialogue to bring about peace. That approach is a hallmark of the EU's efforts to resolve outstanding concerns within the Protocol on Northern Ireland. The European way is to negotiate in good faith, and we expect the same in return from the UK, not bad faith. Taoiseach, you were right when you said it would be a historic low to break an international treaty. I also pay tribute to the Commissioners Maros Šefčovič and before him Michel Barnier for their efforts to resolve these issues. They have shown endless patience and resolve. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my fellow parliamentarians here in this House for their understanding, their deep understanding of the consequences of Brexit and for their unwavering support for Ireland as a small member state. The brutal Russian aggression and invasion of Ukraine illustrates the scale of the threat to multilateralism, to human decency and the international rule of law. All member states have a role to play in the future of defence and security policy. We must support one another. I believe that the future of Ukraine and other Eastern partners is within the EU. But I ask, is it good enough to say that your future lies in Europe? But that could be a generation away. The issues facing Ireland today are mirrored across Europe. Ireland's challenges are Europe's challenges, and Europe's opportunities are Ireland's opportunities. Ireland and the EU must continue to defend democracy and the people of Ukraine. We must respond comprehensively to the current challenges of the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, and work together as we have done during COVID. We are creating the future by the decisions made here today and through our engagement with our citizens. Ireland's future is without doubt at the heart of Europe. Éire go Broch and long live Europe. Gurav Mahagut.
Thank you very much, Francis. Now, on behalf of the S&D Group, Pedro Marques.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Michael Mартін, Taoiseach of Ireland, on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats and my leader, Irache García Pérez, I would want to welcome you to the House of the European Democracy. This Parliament is very much concerned about the position of the UK government on the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol and its impact on the Republic of Ireland, on Northern Ireland and on the UK, and globally on the Good Friday Agreement. So I would like to ask you, can you elaborate further on your views on this matter? And let me take the opportunity of having you here to address also a very different but also complex topic, tax competition. It endangers the so critical collection of resources that you referred to, Taoiseach. Let me say clearly, we welcome resoundingly the fact that the Republic of Ireland joined the OECD tax agreement on minimum corporate taxation. Nevertheless, as we all know, many other practices may still be used to decrease real taxation. Taoiseach, do you agree that the EU and the Member States should cooperate more to level the playing field on these matters? Thank you so much for the opportunity. Welcome to the European Parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marques. And now on behalf of the Renew Group, Stéphane Séjourné.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam President. Taoiseach, dear Michael, thank you for your statement. Allow me, on behalf of a very pro-European movement in this Parliament, to state that we're proud of the Irish government. We can very much count on Ireland to stand up for European unity. Dear Taoiseach, the Irish people can count on Renew Europe and our members to defend their interests. For some time now, the interests of the Irish match the interests of Europe. And we look at the consequences of Brexit, we all know how worried the Irish and Northern Irish citizens are. And we're also worried about the food security and the market. Ireland's dependence on very much Boris Johnson's stability. And there's the Irish Protocol and the Irish, including the Northern Irish people, who 56% voted in favour of parties in favour of that agreement. So it's not unilaterally up to Westminster, in violation, absolutely in breach of international law, to just do whatever they feel like based on their convenience, and Europe having no say, supposedly. Dear Taoiseach, I will take advantage of the fact that I have the floor to draw attention to a very important point for our political group, the proposals to the citizens, the Conference on the Future of Europe. We would make an appeal for a convention so that, if necessary, we can allow our treaties to evolve with the time, to create the right of initiative for the Parliament and a number of decision-making points, unanimity on certain points in the Council, for example. A single state should no longer be able to hold up decisions of hundreds of millions of Europeans. So my question is, what is the Irish government's position on these matters and on this conference? You answered in part, but my political group would like you to elaborate if you don't mind. Thank you very much once again. Long live Europe, long live Ireland.
Monsieur Seisiún. Now, on behalf of the Green Group, I call Philip Lambert to take the floor.
Taoiseach, welcome. Welcome to the European Parliament. Actually, when one looks at the history of your country, a history marked by war, occupation, famine, poverty, mass immigration, a global financial crisis which hit you like few other countries, one might expect a country of anger, bitterness, revenge, and we have none of that. None of that. I'm really struck every time, and you embody that, every time I meet the Irish colleagues, that we find at the same time gravitas, but also a sense of optimism towards the future and humility. There's no grandstanding, it seems, in your country. You don't need to grandstand to be great. And this is what I love so much about the contribution that your people are making to the European Union. And being future-oriented and optimist, to me, comes out of your speech as well. Again, not with big words, but let's take one, sovereignty. Instead of looking at this concept, which means the ability to decide on your own, basically, instead of looking back towards the nation state, and these are your words, you said the European Union is an enabler of sovereignty. It makes us more sovereign, contrary to what some in this House are saying. What I like also, and this is a change from your predecessor and successor, he was also humble enough to recognize 4 years ago that Ireland was a laggard when it comes to the climate transition. And it's true. Ireland was a laggard. But you embraced the new government, and indeed, thanks to the participation of the Greens, but your support, your personal support as Taoiseach, has embraced the green transition. Now, I do see the great plans and the commitments. Last year, Ireland's emissions grew by 6%. So we are still not there. There are still massive efforts to be made, but you and I see that the future of Europe's prosperity lies in leading that transition, rather than following, being laggards. We need to be leaders here if we want Europe to be prosperous. A last point that I will make is tell you that we will stand united and in solidarity with Ireland when it comes to preserving the Good Friday Agreement. We know that we are facing a British government that we can't trust, and I think that even his own party, well, many in his own party recognize that he's not a trustworthy person, but we have to endure. We have to endure and find ways to keep peace in Ireland, and believe us, we are with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamberts. And now on behalf of the ID Group, Marco Zanni. Prego.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President.
Taoiseach Martin, thank you very much indeed for joining us here today, because in these times of major difficulties, one of the most difficult moments faced by the European institutions, it's important to have an ongoing interinstitutional dialogue, in particular between this Parliament and representatives of member states. First and foremost, it's important to ensure coordination and dialogue to strengthen a point on which I believe the European institutions have been a little absent in these difficult times, and that's credibility. When a geopolitical challenge, a major one, is faced, as the one we are facing now in the light of Russian aggression, credibility is really crucially important. Unfortunately, however, due to strategic errors from the past, as we built our union and our model, this credibility, this unity, have been somewhat lacking. So it's crucial that we should work together to ensure that separate blocks are not set up, as sometimes we are seeing emerging in discussions on this emergency. And we have to think about the why and how we can avoid these mistakes in the future. Decades of energy dependency on Russia, that was a political choice actually taken in the past by the EU. That has undermined our position. And right now, when today the Parliament should be voting one of the most important provisions for the future term, we have to be very aware of our past errors to avoid making them again in the future. Energy transition, this Commission has really focused very heavily on that in this term, and the Parliament has been working on it for some time now. It will not be successful if it's led by ideologies and if we don't learn from our past. Tying ourselves hand and foot in times when we're trying to shake off our links with Russia, tying ourselves hand and foot to another geopolitical situation, China, is not the correct path to reshape the socio-economic future of the European Union. We therefore call on everyone to think carefully about this and take the correct strategic decision on our autonomy on this package as well. And let me conclude on a final and further important point. We, the European citizens, have made major efforts to support Ukraine and its people in the face of this aggression. But for some time now, we've been calling for the European institutions to take specific steps, because the burden of this latest crisis, to avoid it falling on the shoulders of our people as well. In the face of the challenges we're facing, inflation, high prices, unemployment, the loss of purchasing power, it's absolutely crucial that there should be three priorities for the European institutions. Work, work, work. We have a huge opportunity to shape our future model, which has to be based on an autonomy which will free us from regimes and render us free in our geopolitical choices. If we are not able to shape that system by learning from the errors of the past, unfortunately, the European Union will remain weak and will always depend on others. Thank you. You can count on us.
The ECR Group, Charlie Weymouth.
Taoiseach. Соціал-демократи Швеції сподівалися, що амністія для мігрантів у 2005 році нам надасть паузу. Але ми бачимо, що це не відбулося. І зараз
One shooting a day, one bombing a week, in areas ruled by criminal gangs and clans caused Bild-Zeitung to name my country the most dangerous country in Europe. Now, I understand that your government is pushing through a mass amnesty. For how many, no one seems to know. Taoiseach, have you looked at migration prognosis for the future? Ipsos tells us that 1.5 billion people would like to migrate if given the opportunity. The French government estimates that 35 to 40% of those would choose to Europe. That's 500 million. That would like to go to our continent if given the opportunity. The same as the whole EU population, Taoiseach. Africa's population is set to grow from 1.4 billion today to 4 billion at the end of this century, and there aren't enough jobs. Taoiseach Martin, do you think that mass amnesties for illegal migrants by EU member states is going to alleviate or worsen migration pressure on Europe? Thank you.
I give the floor next on behalf of the Left Group to Chris McManus.
Thank you, President Metsola. Taoiseach, in his final speech to this Parliament, John Hume proposed that the EU should have a Commissioner for Peace and Reconciliation whose mission would be to promote dialogue and help create a world in which there is no longer any war. We are no closer to that vision, but it is worth holding on to. And I echo these sentiments in the hope that a similar approach underpins Ireland's Council of Europe presidency assumed recently, for as we know, human rights are the core of the Council of Europe. Sometimes in this institution, we let economic considerations blind us to human rights violations. I refer specifically to the British government, which daily shows its contempt for the rule of law and, in particular, international human rights law. They are renouncing the European Convention on Human Rights and actively undermining the Good Friday Agreement. Not only are they unilaterally rewriting the protocol, but also imposing one-sided legislation on the legacy of the conflict, providing an amnesty for crimes committed by state forces. The international community has and needs to continue to defend the Good Friday Agreement. Finally, Taoiseach, could I remind you that human rights often intertwine with social and economic rights. The rights of ordinary people to a home must trump the supposed rights of those who are pricing people out of the housing market or charging extortionate rents.
Thank you. I give the floor next on behalf of the non-attached members to Clara Ponsati-Obiols.
Thank you, President. Taoiseach, thanks for being here and for your remarks. The fundamental rights of any European must be the concern of every European, and in 1976, Ireland led by example. You took the UK to court for torturing detainees in Northern Ireland. It was an uphill fight, but time has shown that you were right. Yet, decades later, we still see judges using evidence extracted by mistreating detainees. A recent ruling of the European Court of Human Rights ruled that a conviction to 17 years based on a confession extracted in isolation and without counsel was not a fair trial. The man was set free. But last week, the Spanish Supreme Court disobeyed and sent him back to jail. Spain's disregard for the Strasbourg Court is astonishing. 11 times have they been condemned for not investigating tortures. But guess what? The judge that was blind to obvious torture in 6 of these cases, the delinquent judge, Mr. Grande Marlaska, is now security minister in Spain. Taoiseach, the tolerance of EU authorities to Spanish human rights violation is alarming. We urge you to make your voice and speak clearly about that. We need to hear Ireland's voice again. Please defend human rights for all Europeans. Thank you very much.
I give the floor now once again to Taoiseach Martin to respond to the questions of the group leaders.
First of all, could I thank all of the members for responding and for the points that you've made. And I think Honourable Member Francis Fitzgerald made, I think, a number of key points, not least the transformative impact, again, of European Union membership in Ireland, and particularly women in Ireland over the last 50 years. And also, I think you made a key point in relation to enlargement. And I think you posed a question, if we say to countries that we want you to join or we're opening the door, why does it take so long? And my own view is that the enlargement process has taken far too long. And I think we need to have a fundamental reflection on this. We were with the Western Balkans before Christmas last. There is no reason why North Macedonia and Albania should not be members of the European Union now. And in my view, we have to accelerate the process. We have to make a fundamental call as a union in terms of enlargement. Ireland... My own personal view is coming from where we're coming from, Ireland, 1973. It has been transformative. There's no point in saying anything else. And because of that, I always feel it very difficult to put a barrier up against another country that wishes to join that fulfills the criteria. That would be our view. We don't think politics should get in the way, or localised or regionalised issues should get in the way of a country being allowed to join. I think it's a key question. It's a fundamental point that we should all reflect on. I think the next issue was 2 points from, I think it's Marquez, in relation to, first of all, the protocol. Now, you asked me to elaborate. I don't think I have the time to elaborate fully. But what I would say is that Maros Sefcovic, if there was a Nobel Peace Prize for patience, he would win it hands down. And I want to thank him for the role that he has played. But to say that fundamentally where it's at is that unionist politicians have raised legitimate questions, issues around the operation of the protocol. And we believe the European Union, that is, believes that it can resolve these issues. But the fundamental question remains as to what the British government's ultimate position is. And that's why I referred in my opening address to the absence of political will. I just simply do not detect a sustained political will on behalf of the UK government to settle this and resolve this, because it, without question, can be resolved. And the more fundamental concern I have is on that overall stability of the architecture of the Good Friday Agreement and the spirit that informs that. I said earlier, that it took a lot of work from a lot of people to get the Good Friday Agreement over the line. And therefore, we should all be very, very careful in doing anything that could undermine that. And I feel the UK government is not giving due consideration to the totality of what's involved in the Good Friday Agreement. And on tax competition, again, Ireland was very constructive and cooperative in terms of the OECD process, and we've signed up to that as a country. We continue to engage at international level in all fora in relation to tax issue. But the more fundamental issue that we find now in terms of foreign direct investment coming into Ireland is the talent question. And most companies are in search of talent or ability and so on. That speaks to the question of migration that a colleague also spoke about and questioned Ireland's, asserted that there was an amnesty in Ireland. There's no amnesty in Ireland, but we do believe that if the undocumented are undocumented for a long period of time, they need to have their lives regularised. They need to have their lives resolved and become full citizens of Ireland. That's what we're doing. And just would make the point in terms of the question around migration. The reason President Biden is President of the United States is because of an enormous migratory trail from Ireland to the United States after the famine and throughout the 19th century. We are the last country to start condemning migration or to take a very narrow perspective on migration. And that is our position on that. And one of the transformative things in Ireland today is the multiculturalism of modern Ireland. That so many countries have come from within Europe, or citizens have come from within Europe and beyond Europe to live in Ireland. I was taken by what Philip said earlier, that there is still that generosity of spirit still in Ireland, and that engagement, and long may that continue. We have to work at that. There are always challenges around that. And I take on board what the nice comments you made in terms of humility and gravitas and so on. Although the city I come from in Ireland, people don't normally associate us with humility or modesty, but that's an internal Irish matter. But I do take your point on climate change. It's about delivery now. We have passed the legislation. I think what we have done, though, is put the template in place and the foundations for fundamental change into the future. The real challenge is delivery and really getting political consensus on delivery. And I'm passionately committed to this and to the restoration of biodiversity as well. And we've a journey to travel, but we're committed to doing it, and the legal framework is in place. And if I say so, offshore wind is will be a very big development in Ireland over the next decade or so, and we're going, we will be a net exporter in the mid-2030s of energy because of the fact that we have a lot of wind around our coast, which is 7 times the landmass of Ireland. And in terms of, I think Stephanie's point in terms of the Conference of the Future for Europe, we are very open, and I'm very open to the idea of treaty change on the basis of the enlargement question. If we enlarge, we have to work out how we manage and operate the Union more efficiently and more effectively. We can't operate with old rules as the Union enlarges itself. So we're very much in favour of really pursuing that particular issue and being open to change in terms of how we do things within the Council, the Parliament's right to initiative, and so forth. I would have a strong belief in public health, for example. I was a former Minister for Health. I witnessed how every domain, every national state, we can't allow our health systems or whatever be the competency to move to Europe and so on. What we saw during the pandemic, public health now as a discipline within the broader health arena really is a European competency. And the hEorpa initiative and all of that is essential to the future of public health across Europe. When I was the Minister for Health, there was no chance of procuring vaccines. Not a chance. It was so discordant and so forth. To me, it was a marvel to see Europe procure vaccines, enable the production of vaccines, and become the largest donor of vaccines in the world, for which the European Union doesn't get credit. The largest donor and most consistent donor of vaccines across the European Union. In terms of the energy transition, and I think, Zani, if I might have the names correct, but the point made in relation to the geopolitical situation, ties to China, I think the war on Ukraine is causing us all to reflect very deeply on how we develop relationships into the future, how we maintain them in terms of the rule of law, values and democracy. And I think that's going to be a period of further reflection in terms of how we engage with others who also transgress the fundamental values in our system. I think I've dealt with the migration issue. Suffice to say that we need to work much harder on climate change, on a whole range of issues, to reduce the necessity for migration and to enable sustainability within many countries in the neighbourhood of Europe and in Africa in terms of economic sustainability, social sustainability, climate sustainability. That's ultimately the way that we have a proper balanced approach to these issues. In relation to Chris McManus's point, in terms of, again, I was at the Council of Europe yesterday, met with the Secretary-General, also visited the court, the European Court of Human Rights, which is a strong resonance with Ireland because of our history and because of the work it did in terms of Northern Ireland. Also in the Éire case, for example, which was fundamental in terms of access to legal aid, not just for Ireland, but for the entirety of Europe in terms of that decision. And also the Norris case and LGBTQ rights, and the leasuithe case also. So we have a strong affinity with that. Again, what was interesting is the United Kingdom government have nothing to fear from the European Court of Human Rights. In fact, it has one of the lowest number of cases against it. It seems to be very determined to create problems where problems don't really exist. So we're very committed to that. And again, on a more general level, in terms of tolerance of any violation of human rights, we are very strong on human rights as a country. We want to be, and we will continue to play our part at European Union level in advancing human rights. I want to thank you all very much for your contributions. It's been a privilege and an honour for me to address you as Taoiseach, and I look forward to engaging with you in the time ahead. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.